The wormhole stood in the center of the chamber like a wound in space. It was not just light or shadow, it was alive. The surface of it twisted and folded, glowing blue one moment, then deep black the next. It moved in a slow rhythm, like breathing, and if one listened closely, they could hear it. A faint hum, almost like a heartbeat. The world had never seen anything like this before. Scientists had studied it for years, but no one had dared to enter. Machines had been sent through. Probes, cameras, even drones. Every single one disappeared, never to return. Some were destroyed instantly, torn apart like paper. Others sent back strange static signals, voices mixed with whispers that no one could understand. Yet today was different. Today, for the first time, a human would step inside. His name was Dr. Adrian Keller, a scientist and an explorer. He was not a soldier, not a fighter, but a man who had spent his life searching for the unknown. He believed the wormhole held answers. Answers to questions about time, space, and maybe even life itself. While others feared it, he felt drawn to it, as if the wormhole was calling him. Crowds had gathered far beyond the military base. News cameras recorded every second. The world was watching. Presidents, generals, children, families. Every eye was fixed on the dark circle that pulsed in the air like a living star. Inside the chamber, soldiers stood with weapons ready, though no weapon had ever worked against the wormhole's strange energy. Scientists adjusted machines, watching numbers spike and screens glitch. A loudspeaker crackled. "Dr. Keller, are you ready?" a voice asked. He stood tall in his suit, a thin layer of protective armor designed for radiation, though no one truly knew if it would help. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with determination. He gave a small nod. "I am ready," he answered. The chamber fell silent. Even the hum of the wormhole seemed to grow quieter, as if it too was listening. Dr. Keller took a slow step forward. His boots echoed against the metal floor. He reached the final platform, standing only a few meters away from the swirling gate. His breath fogged inside his helmet. People across the world leaned closer to their screens. Some whispered prayers. Others whispered fears. The wormhole twisted again, forming shapes that almost looked like faces, eyes, mouths, hands reaching out. But in a blink, they were gone. Dr. Keller looked at it with steady eyes. He thought of his family, his colleagues, the world that depended on him. He thought of what might wait on the other side. New worlds, new life, maybe even new dangers. He had no answers, only questions, and yet he stepped forward. 1 step. 2 steps. The air around him grew colder. His suit sensors screamed warnings. His heart pounded, but he did not stop. The wormhole pulled at him like a tide. The hum grew louder, shaking the walls, vibrating the floor. Lights flickered. Alarms beeped. Soldiers gripped their rifles tighter. Dr. Keller reached the edge. The surface of the wormhole rippled like water, dark and endless. He lifted one gloved hand and touched it. It was not solid. It was not liquid. It was something else. Something alive. The wormhole pulsed under his touch, like a heart answering his own heartbeat. He took a deep breath. His last breath on Earth. Then, without hesitation, he stepped through. The wormhole swallowed him instantly. His body stretched, twisted, vanished into the black light, and then he was gone. The chamber exploded with noise. Alarms blared. Scientists shouted at one another, watching their screens crash into static. The wormhole pulsed violently, then calmed, humming softly again. On the other side of the glass, people screamed and cheered. Some were terrified. Others clapped, believing history had been made. But the truth was, no one knew what had just happened. The world waited. Seconds passed. Then minutes. The wormhole remained the same, pulsing slowly, humming like a heart that no one could see. Machines continued to scan, but nothing returned. An hour passed. Then 2, then 3. The soldiers lowered their rifles. The scientists looked hopeless. The crowds outside began to wonder if the man would ever come back. Maybe he was gone forever. Maybe he had reached another world, or maybe the wormhole had simply eaten him alive. But just as people started to lose hope, the wormhole pulsed again. The hum grew louder. The walls trembled. The light inside the wormhole began to twist, brighter and darker at the same time, forming strange patterns no one could understand. The scientists stared at their screens, unable to look away. The soldiers raised their rifles again, and then something moved inside. It was a shadow at first, a shape, a figure. Slowly it stepped forward. Everyone watching froze in silence. Their eyes widened, because what came out of the wormhole did not look human. The chamber froze in silence as the wormhole pulsed like a living heart. Lights flickered across the walls and the hum grew louder, vibrating through the floor. Soldiers tightened their grip on their rifles, their eyes fixed on the glowing circle. Scientists leaned forward, hands shaking over keyboards and monitors. And then, out of the swirling black and blue storm, a figure stumbled. At first glance, it looked like Dr. Adrian Keller. He wore the same protective suit, though torn in places, scorched as if burned by fire. His helmet was cracked and steam curled from its edges. He fell to his knees on the metal floor, his head hanging low. For a moment, hope rushed through the room. "He made it back!" one of the scientists shouted. People outside watching the broadcast began to cheer. Families cried in relief. Around the world, millions clapped and shouted his name. But the cheering did not last long. Dr. Keller slowly lifted his head. His helmet had cracked wide open, revealing his face. It was pale, too pale, almost colorless. His skin seemed thin, stretched tight over his bones. And his eyes? They were no longer the same. They glowed faintly, like embers deep inside ash. The soldiers raised their rifles again. One of them whispered, "That's not him. Not anymore." Dr. Keller did not speak. He only looked around the chamber, his glowing eyes sweeping across every person in the room. The hum of the wormhole grew louder with each second he remained. Machines sparked and screens filled with static. The scientists tried to scan his vitals. The results made no sense. His heartbeat was too slow, once every 10 seconds, then none at all. His blood was not normal. It flickered with strange signals, almost as if something inside him carried electricity. Dr. Keller pushed himself to his feet. His movements were slow, stiff, unnatural, like someone trying to remember how to walk. The suit hung loose on him as if his body had changed shape. A brave scientist stepped forward. "Dr. Keller, can you hear me? Can you speak?" For a long moment there was nothing, just silence. Then, he tilted his head in a sharp, unnatural way. His lips moved, but no sound came. Suddenly, every speaker in the chamber burst with static, and through the static came his voice. It was his voice. And yet it wasn't. It was layered, broken, as if 100 voices spoke at once through him. "Not Keller." The chamber went cold. Everyone froze where they stood. The scientist took a step back. "What do you mean?" Keller's eyes glowed brighter. His cracked helmet fell apart, clattering on the floor. He stood taller now, his face expressionless, his body trembling like something was moving beneath his skin. "Not human," he whispered, but this time his lips did not move. The voice echoed from the walls, the machines, even inside people's heads. The wormhole pulsed violently behind him, answering his words. The soldiers snapped. "Restrain him!" They rushed forward, but as they got close, the lights exploded. Sparks rained from the ceiling. The soldiers stopped in panic, raising their rifles again. Keller didn't move. He only stared. One soldier fired. The bullet struck him in the chest, yet there was no blood. The bullet fell to the ground, flattened, as if it had hit steel. Keller turned his head slowly toward the soldier. The man froze in terror. Every light in the chamber flickered again. Monitors showed strange symbols, alien patterns no one had ever seen. The wormhole pulsed harder, faster, like it was waiting. One scientist whispered, He brought something back with him." Keller suddenly lifted his hand. His fingers stretched too long, bending in unnatural ways. A shadow spread from his arm, crawling across the floor like black smoke. The soldiers backed away, terrified. The voice came again, louder now, shaking the room. "It is coming." Everyone froze. "What is coming?" The commander shouted, his voice trembling. Keller looked at him, and for the first time he smiled. It was not his smile. It was too wide, too sharp, too empty. He whispered again, this time in a language no one understood. The words scraped against the walls like claws, and people felt the sound deep in their skulls. Suddenly, alarms screamed across the base. The wormhole was growing, stretching wider, glowing brighter. The machines monitoring it broke into sparks. The hum grew so loud it felt like thunder. The scientists panicked. "It's unstable! It's opening wider!" Keller didn't move. He stood calm, his glowing eyes fixed on the wormhole as if he was waiting for something to step through. The soldiers aimed their weapons, but deep inside, every one of them knew the truth. The man who had entered the wormhole was gone, and what had returned was something else entirely. The chamber smelled of smoke and fear. The wormhole pulsed in the background, glowing brighter with every second, while Dr. Adrian Keller, or whatever he had become, stood motionless in the center of the room. His glowing eyes scanned the soldiers, the scientists, every terrified face around him. No one moved. No one even breathed too loudly. Finally, the commander barked an order. "Take him to medical now!" Two soldiers approached, hesitating with every step. Keller did not resist as they guided him down the hall. His body felt colder than ice beneath their gloves, and his skin twitched as if something inside was moving. They swallowed hard but said nothing. The medical wing was ready. Doctors and scientists surrounded the bed as Keller was strapped down, though the straps shook as if they barely held him. Machines hummed, scanning his body, showing results that made no sense. His blood pressure spiked, then vanished. His heartbeat was sometimes too slow, sometimes too fast, sometimes not there at all. His blood samples shimmered with a strange light, shifting from red to black to something no one could name. One doctor whispered, "He's changing." Keller opened his eyes. The glow inside them was brighter now, spreading into the veins on his face. His lips moved, but no sound came. Yet the machines around him began to glitch, static flooding every monitor. On one screen, symbols appeared, curved shapes, jagged lines, not from any human language. A scientist leaned closer, whispering, "It's writing. Something is trying to communicate." Suddenly, Keller's voice filled the room, not from his mouth, but from the machines themselves echoing through the static. "Not alone." Everyone froze. The commander frowned. "What do you mean, not alone?" Keller turned his head toward him, though his eyes never blinked. His smile stretched too wide. Inside, the words hit everyone like a wave of cold. The straps holding Keller began to tighten on their own, as if something inside his body was pushing against them. His fingers bent backward, unnaturally long now. His chest moved in strange rhythms, not like breathing, but like pulsing, as if a second heart beat inside him. A nurse screamed as the lights exploded. Shadows crawled along the walls, twisting into shapes, faces, claws, wings. They vanished when the lights flickered back, but the terror remained. The commander shouted, "Sedate him!" A doctor rushed forward with a syringe, jabbing it into Keller's arm. The liquid flowed into his veins. For a moment his body went still. His eyes dimmed. The room exhaled in relief, but then his skin rippled. The veins glowed brighter, burning through the sedative like fire through paper. His eyes opened wider than human eyes should. The machines screamed alarms. His body temperature soared, then plummeted. His heartbeat stopped completely, yet he sat up on the bed. The straps snapped like paper. The soldiers raised their rifles instantly, pointing them at his chest. "Keller! Stay down!" the commander barked. Keller tilted his head again, unnatural, bird-like. His voice came in that layered echo. "You still believe I am Keller?" The soldiers exchanged terrified glances. The commander gritted his teeth. "If you're not Keller, then who are you?" Keller's smile widened. His skin shifted as if something beneath it wanted out. For a brief second, his face looked like a dozen faces, all layered on top of one another, screaming silently. "We are not who. We are what waits." The words shook the air itself. Every glass in the room cracked. The scientists backed away. The nurses sobbed in fear. The soldiers' hands shook on their rifles. Keller stood, his body taller now, stretched. The shadows on the floor twisted under his feet like roots, crawling outward. Wherever the shadows touched, machines short-circuited, screens shattered. One soldier panicked and fired. The bullet hit Keller's shoulder. His body shuddered, but instead of bleeding, the wound opened into a dark void, sucking in the bullet until it vanished. The hole closed, leaving nothing behind. Keller's glowing eyes turned on the soldier. The man dropped his rifle, clutching his head, screaming as if voices were tearing through his mind. He collapsed to the ground, shaking, whispering words in the same strange language Keller had spoken before. The room erupted in chaos. Soldiers dragged the screaming man away. Scientists shouted into radios for backup. Alarms blared as the wormhole in the main chamber pulsed harder, glowing brighter than ever before. Keller walked forward slowly, each step echoing like thunder. His voice filled the room again. "The door is open. You called it a wormhole. We call it the Veil." The commander's voice shook. "What do you want?" Keller stopped, tilting his head, his smile growing sharper. "Want? No. This is not about what we want. It is about what will come." Everyone froze. The wormhole pulsed so violently now that the ground shook. Cracks spread across the walls of the chamber. Lights flickered on and off like a dying heartbeat. Keller lifted his hand, fingers stretching, bones cracking as shadows dripped from his skin. "The change begins!" And with those words, the alarm screamed louder. The wormhole tore wider, spilling light and shadow across the chamber. Something was coming, and humanity was not ready. The base shook as if an earthquake had struck. The wormhole pulsed violently in the main chamber, spilling waves of blue and black light across the walls. Every alarm in the facility screamed, and red warning lights bathed the rooms in a harsh glow. Dr. Keller, or the thing that wore his face, stood still in the medical bay. His glowing eyes reflected the chaos, his smile calm, almost satisfied. Soldiers aimed their rifles at him, but their hands trembled. Everyone knew bullets would not help. Suddenly, Keller whispered. His voice was soft, yet it filled every corner of the room, echoing inside the skulls of those who heard it. "They are already here." The commander stepped forward, his jaw tight. "What do you mean?" "Who is here?" Before Keller could answer, one of the scientists screamed. She clutched her head, dropping to her knees. Her eyes rolled back and her mouth opened, but it was not her voice that came out. "Open the way! Open the way!" Her body shook violently. Blood dripped from her nose. Then, as suddenly as it started, she collapsed, lifeless. Everyone froze in horror. The commander barked, "Get her out of here! Now!" But more screams followed. Another soldier fell, gripping his helmet, yelling about whispers inside his mind. A nurse clawed at her ears, crying that she could hear voices speaking in a language she couldn't understand. Keller's smile widened. Shadows crawled from his feet, spreading across the floor. "They touch your minds before they touch your world," he said. "This is only the beginning," the commander shouted. "Restrain him! Don't let him leave this room!" Two soldiers rushed forward, but as they approached, the shadows on the floor rose like snakes, wrapping around their legs. The men screamed, firing their rifles, but the bullets passed through the shadows harmlessly. In seconds, the soldiers were dragged down, their bodies shaking violently as the blackness seeped into their skin. Their eyes turned pale white before their bodies went limp. The rest of the team backed away in terror. The commander, breathing hard, pulled a sidearm and aimed it at Keller's head. "Whatever you are, I'll end this now." Keller tilted his head, unblinking. "You cannot end what has already begun." Before the commander could fire, the wormhole in the main chamber released a deafening roar. Not a machine sound, not static. This was alive. The ground shook. Walls cracked and lights exploded in showers of sparks. Every monitor in the facility lit up at once, displaying the same image. Strange symbols. Glowing patterns that looked like eyes staring back. The scientists panicked. "It's breaching! Something's trying to cross!" Through the thick glass, separating the medical wing from the main chamber, they could see it. Shapes pressed against the inside of the wormhole. Dark, twisted forms, shifting like smoke but heavier. Clawed hands scraping against the veil of light. The wormhole bulged, stretching outward like something inside was pushing to escape. One of the scientists gasped. "Dear God, there's more than one." Keller stepped closer to the glass. His shadows melted back into his body, his form twitching as if it was hard to hold its shape. His voice dropped to a whisper, yet it carried over the chaos. "The veil is thin. "The first will come soon," the commander shouted. "Seal the chamber, now!" Metal doors slammed shut around the wormhole chamber, heavy barriers locking into place. But even behind solid steel, the humming and pounding continued. The sound rattled the walls, making every person in the base feel as though the thing inside the wormhole was hammering directly against their skulls. Keller turned away from the glass and looked at the soldiers. His glowing eyes dimmed for a moment, then flared brighter. His voice became a chorus, dozens of voices layered together. "You tried to control the unknown. You opened the way yourselves. Now you cannot close it," the commander snapped. "You're lying. You wanted this?" Keller's body twitched, his neck cracking as his smile stretched too wide. "We are only the messenger." "What follows?" "Is not ours to command." The room shook again. A loud boom echoed through the base, as if something massive had struck the sealed doors from the other side. Dust rained from the ceiling. Scientists screamed, soldiers panicked, alarms blared. Another boom. The doors bent inward slightly, metal groaning. Keller's voice dropped to a whisper that chilled everyone's blood. "The first sign has come." The lights died, plunging the base into darkness. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the heavy breathing of terrified men and women. Then in the dark, glowing eyes opened. Too many eyes to count, filling the chamber beyond the doors. Something was waiting to come through, and it was no longer a question of if, but when. The sealed chamber doors groaned under the weight of something enormous pressing against them. Each strike echoed through the base like thunder. Dust rained from the ceiling. Sparks jumped from broken wires. The red emergency lights flickered, dying one by one. The soldiers stood frozen, rifles aimed, sweat dripping down their faces. No one wanted to open fire. No one even wanted to breathe. Keller stood at the center of the medical bay, his glowing eyes fixed on the doors. He looked calm, almost pleased, as if he had been waiting for this moment all along. His shadow stretched and shifted beneath his feet, alive, twisting like smoke in water. Another boom shook the chamber. This time the heavy doors bent outward, metal screeching as cracks split through the steel. A scientist shouted, "The barriers won't hold. They weren't built for this." The commander barked, "Evacuate non-essential staff." "Move!" Panic spread instantly. Scientists and medics rushed toward the exit, their footsteps echoing in the dark halls. But even as they ran, whispers filled the air. Soft, cold voices slithered into their minds, speaking in that same alien tongue Keller had used. One soldier dropped his weapon, clutching his helmet. "They're in my head. They're inside." He collapsed, convulsing, his eyes glowing faintly for a moment before going still. Another scientist screamed as she saw shadows crawling along the ceiling, stretching like long fingers. They weren't just in the chamber anymore, they were seeping into every corner of the base. The commander clenched his teeth, refusing to back down. He turned his pistol on Keller. "What's coming?" "What are you letting through?" Keller tilted his head, smiling too wide, his voice echoing like a chorus of whispers. "The first wave. The Scouts of the Veil. You call them monsters. We call them the beginning." The commander's hand shook, but he didn't lower the weapon. "If they get out, humanity won't survive." Keller's expression darkened. Survival was never yours to claim. The steel doors finally gave way. They ripped open with a deafening shriek, metal tearing apart like paper. Behind them, the wormhole pulsed, larger than ever before. It was no longer a circle of light. It had grown into a tearing wound in reality. Its edges sparking with lightning, its center swirling with endless black. And then, something stepped through. At first it was only a shadow, tall and thin, stretching unnaturally as it crawled out of the wormhole. Its body was covered in shifting black smoke, yet inside the smoke glowed sharp bones, claws that scraped against the floor. The creature let out a sound that was not a scream. Not a roar, but something in between, like steel grinding against stone, mixed with voices crying all at once. The sound pierced the ears of everyone in the chamber. Some dropped to their knees, covering their heads. "Open fire!" the commander roared. Bullets ripped through the air. The soldiers unleashed everything they had, the noise of gunfire filling the base. But the bullets passed through the creature as if it was made of smoke. The only response was a deeper, louder scream that shook the floor. The creature lunged forward, In a single swipe, one soldier was thrown against the wall, his armor shattered, his body broken instantly. Another was dragged into the shadowy mist, his screams echoing before they were cut off. The survivors panicked, pulling back toward the exits. The commander grabbed a fallen rifle and kept firing, even knowing it did nothing. His voice shook with rage. "Keep it contained! Do not let it leave the base!" But the wormhole pulsed again, and more shapes pressed against its surface. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Keller stepped closer to the chaos, his eyes glowing brighter than ever. His voice carried above the screams and the gunfire. "The veil is open. The first are here. The rest will follow." The commander turned toward him, fury in his eyes. "If you're the key, then we'll break the key." He fired directly at Keller's head. For a split second, Keller staggered. His body twitched violently, shadows peeling away from his skin. But then he straightened again, unharmed. His smile returned. "You cannot break what is no longer yours to command." Another creature forced its way through the wormhole. Then another. The base shook under their weight. Their voices filled the air, their claws scraping the metal floor, their glowing eyes piercing through the smoke. The scientists who had tried to flee were already screaming in the hallways. Shadows raced ahead of them, cutting them off. The base was no longer safe. Nowhere was. The commander lowered his weapon, realizing the truth. The battle wasn't just lost. The war had already begun. He whispered to himself, "God help us." Keller's glowing eyes turned toward him, and his voice answered softly, "God is not here." The wormhole thundered again, wider than before. The facility trembled as if it were about to collapse, and through the storm of shadows, more creatures began to pour into the world. The alarms had stopped working. The sirens that once screamed warnings had gone silent, their wires torn, their speakers shattered. Only the sound of claws on metal, of shadows whispering in the walls, filled the underground base. The facility, once a fortress of science and military power, was breaking apart piece by piece. Pipes burst overhead, steam hissing through the air. The floor vibrated under the weight of creatures forcing themselves out of the wormhole. The entire structure groaned as if it were alive and terrified. The commander barked into his radio, "This is Base 9. We are under breach. Wormhole containment failed. Repeat, containment failed. Request immediate strike." Static answered him. No reinforcements, no help. The surface above might already be compromised. The soldiers fought on, their gunfire useless against the shadows that kept spreading across the walls and ceiling. Some fired anyway, refusing to give up, while others broke, dropping their weapons and running into the dark hallways. Those who ran never came back. Keller stood at the edge of the chaos, untouched. His glowing eyes tracked every soldier, every scream, every death. He no longer looked human at all. His skin shifted, his veins glowing faintly beneath the surface, his movements smooth and unnatural. The commander glared at him, fury keeping him steady even as fear gripped his chest. "What are you?" Keller tilted his head, his voice echoing. "I was human. Once. Now I am the voice of the veil. And soon, you will be too." The words chilled the soldiers more than the creatures did. One young soldier, trembling, raised his rifle. "Stay back! Stay away from me!" Keller's shadow stretched across the floor, reaching the soldier's boots. The man screamed as the shadow climbed up his legs like black fire. His body stiffened, his eyes turning white. He dropped his weapon, lips moving silently. When the shadow finally released him, he wasn't the same. He stood straight, calm, and turned his weapon not on Keller, but on his own squad. Gunfire tore through the soldiers. Screams followed. Chaos doubled. The commander shouted, "Fall back! Regroup! Fall back to Sector 4!" But the corridors themselves were collapsing. Sections of ceiling fell, blocking escape routes. Sparks rained down. The base was becoming a tomb. In the control room above, scientists watched the disaster unfold through broken monitors. Some wept, some prayed. Others argued, their voices sharp with fear. "We have to shut the wormhole manually," one shouted. "That's suicide! Look at them! You won't even reach the chamber. If we don't close it, they'll spread beyond the base. Do you want the entire world consumed?" The argument ended as the lights flickered, then went dark. Backup power struggled to hold, bathing the control room in faint red. Through the monitors, they saw the wormhole growing. It pulsed with each second, the air around it cracking like shattered glass. More creatures pressed against its surface, their bodies scraping, their claws glowing faintly, each one larger than the last. The commander stood his ground in the lower chamber. His rifle was empty, but he still held it like a weapon. His surviving squad of 6 stood with him, fear in their eyes but determination in their stance. "Keller!" the commander shouted over the roar of the wormhole. "If there's still a piece of you that's human, stop this! Help us close it!" For a brief second, Keller froze. His glowing eyes flickered as if something inside him hesitated. Then he smiled, not with joy, but with pity. "You don't close the veil, you only open it wider." At that moment, the wormhole screamed. A blast of force erupted from it, throwing soldiers and equipment across the room. The floor cracked, giant splits racing outward. Machinery collapsed, sparks exploding into the air, and then the true horror stepped forward. It was not like the first creatures. This one was colossal, its head scraping the high ceiling, its limbs covered in jagged armor that looked like bone. Its mouth opened sideways, full of glowing teeth. Each breath it took pulled the air from the room, making it hard to breathe. Even Keller lowered his head in reverence. "The Harbinger?" The commander's blood ran cold. If the smaller creatures had already destroyed half his men, this thing could tear through cities. One soldier whispered, "We're dead!" But the commander refused to surrender. He staggered to his feet, gripping a grenade from his belt. His voice shook, but his will didn't. Not yet. The Harbinger turned its glowing eyes toward him, a sound like laughter vibrating through the air. Before he could throw the grenade, Keller's hand shot forward, shadows whipping out like chains, wrapping around the commander's arm. The grenade clattered to the floor. Keller leaned close, his glowing eyes inches away. "Your fight ends here. Humanity's fight ends tonight," the commander spat in his face. "Then I'll drag you down with me." The wormhole pulsed again, wider, hungrier. The base was no longer a battlefield. It was a grave waiting to be filled. The Harbinger's massive frame filled the chamber, blotting out the emergency lights. Each movement it made shook the ground, dust falling like rain from the cracked ceiling. Its breathing alone sounded like thunder rolling through hollow mountains. The surviving soldiers stared at the towering figure, frozen between awe and terror. Their weapons trembled in their hands, but none dared fire. Bullets had done nothing to the smaller creatures. What chance did they have against this? The commander pulled himself upright, still pinned by the shadow chains Keller had wrapped around his arm. His chest heaved with effort, but his eyes stayed sharp. "Keller!" he shouted. "Listen to me. If that thing gets out of here, humanity is finished. Do you even understand what you've brought through?" Keller's expression was calm, almost gentle. "I understand perfectly. This world will finally evolve. The veil will consume the weak, and only those who accept the shadow will survive." The commander's lip curled in disgust. "That's not survival. That's surrender." The Harbinger lowered its head, glowing eyes burning as it studied the humans. A sound, low and terrible, rumbled from its throat, something between speech and hunger. The smaller creatures scattered around the chamber, bowing in silence. One soldier whispered, It commands them." The commander knew they were out of time. The wormhole pulsed again, spreading cracks across the floor. More shapes pressed against its swirling surface. If the Harbinger wasn't stopped now, nothing would stop the flood that followed. He looked at his squad, just 5 left, battered and bloodied, but still standing. Their faces told him the truth. They knew this was their last fight. "Listen to me!" the commander barked, his voice firm. "We hold them here. If this thing escapes, Earth is lost. We don't let it leave this chamber, no matter the cost." The soldiers exchanged glances, fear in their eyes, but they nodded. One of them, a young woman with blood on her face, swallowed hard. "Sir, what's the plan?" The commander glanced at the broken equipment around the chamber, explosives, fuel tanks, power conduits sparking wildly. "All unstable, all dangerous. We overload the reactor," he said grimly. "We bury them all with us." For a moment, silence. Then one soldier muttered, "So this is it." "No going back, no going back," the commander agreed. Keller's smile widened. You would destroy yourselves? How human. Always so eager to die rather than accept what you could become. The commander snarled, pulling against the shadow chains. Better ashes than slaves. At that, the Harbinger roared. The sound was deafening, shaking the base to its core. The smaller creatures charged, shadows racing ahead of them. Hold the line! The commander shouted. Gunfire lit the chamber. Soldiers emptied magazines into the advancing swarm. Shadows twisted and bodies fell, both human and alien. Each step forward was a struggle, but they refused to give ground. One soldier was dragged into the dark, his screams echoing before silence claimed him. Another went down under a swipe from the Harbinger's claw. His body crushed instantly. The survivors kept fighting. Meanwhile, in the control room above, two scientists worked desperately at the failing consoles. The power core's readings spiked, alarms blaring. If we trigger a manual overload, one gasped, it'll vaporize the entire facility. That's the point, the other shouted back. Do it! Before they break through! Back in the chamber, the commander finally tore free of Keller's shadow grip, his arm bleeding but unbroken. He grabbed a fallen rifle and fired straight into Keller's chest. The bullet slowed Keller but didn't stop him. Shadows poured from the wounds, sealing them instantly. Keller advanced, voice echoing like a storm. You cannot stop the veil. Every bullet you fire, every drop of blood you spill, it only feeds us. The commander spat blood, his voice raw. Then let's see if you can feed on fire. He pulled a detonator from his vest, the device blinking red. The Harbinger's glowing eyes snapped to him, recognizing the threat. With terrifying speed, it lunged forward, claws tearing through the floor as it reached for him. The commander shouted to his squad, "Buy me time!" The last of his soldiers threw themselves at the swarm, firing, stabbing, even using their fists when their ammo ran dry. Each one fell, but each bought the commander another precious second. Keller's smile faltered for the first time as he realized what was about to happen. You fool! You'll burn with them! The commander's eyes burned with grim resolve. As long as you burn first. The detonator blinked faster. Above, the scientists shouted as the power core spiked. The countdown had begun. The entire base would soon become a furnace. The Harbinger roared again, shadows flaring around it, trying to smother the humans before the explosion. The commander closed his eyes for just a moment. He thought of the surface above, of sunlight, of his family, of Earth still alive and free. Then he opened them again, staring straight at Keller. Tell your veil, he growled. Humanity doesn't surrender. The chamber filled with blinding light, and then the explosion tore through the underground base like the wrath of a dying star. White fire engulfed the chamber, consuming metal, shadow, and flesh alike. The blast ripped through the walls, collapsing entire corridors in an instant. The roar drowned out every scream, every roar, every whisper. Then came silence. Above ground, a shock wave split the earth. Dust and smoke erupted into the night sky, rising in a black pillar that could be seen for miles. The facility was gone, buried under tons of rock and molten steel. For a long while, nothing moved. Then, from the edge of the smoking crater, a lone figure crawled free. The commander. His armor was scorched, his body broken, but he was alive. He dragged himself forward with trembling arms, coughing up blood, forcing each breath through cracked ribs. Every step felt like his last, but he refused to stop. He collapsed against a jagged rock, eyes staring up at the stars above. The sky looked calm, untouched, as if it had not just witnessed the beginning of humanity's greatest war. His hand shook as he reached for his radio. Miraculously, the device still flickered with weak light. This is Commander Hale. Base 9 is destroyed. Wormhole compromised. He coughed, blood staining his lips. I don't know if... It's enough. The radio spat static. No answer. Maybe no one was left to hear. He closed his eyes, exhaustion pulling at him. But before he could surrender to the darkness, he heard it. Faint, distant, a hum. His eyes snapped open. There, at the center of the crater, smoke swirled unnaturally. Black shapes twisted in the air, curling like serpents. And then, a faint glow. The commander's heart froze. The wormhole. It was smaller now, unstable, its edges sparking wildly. But it wasn't gone. No, he whispered. No, no, no. A voice slithered across the wind, familiar, cold. You buried the chamber. You burned the flesh. But the veil cannot be destroyed. Keller! The commander turned his head weakly. A figure stepped through the smoke, burned, cracked, yet standing tall. Keller's body looked half human, half shadow, his face torn but his glowing eyes unbroken. He smiled, slow and terrible. You delayed us. That is all. The commander tried to lift his pistol, but his arm was too heavy. It slipped from his grasp, clattering onto the dirt. Keller crouched down in front of him, tilting his head. You are strong, fierce. You could have been more than human. You still can. The commander spat blood onto his face. Go to hell. Keller's smile widened. Hell is already here. Behind him, the wormhole pulsed again. Shapes pressed against its surface. Smaller this time, faint. But they were there. The invasion wasn't over. It had only begun. The commander's vision blurred. His body screamed in pain. His mind begged him to let go. But deep inside, his will burned. If the wormhole was still alive, then so was the fight. He forced one last breath, his voice low but steady. Humanity won't stop. Keller's glowing eyes flickered, the faintest shadow of hesitation passing across his face. Then he stood, turning back to the wormhole, his voice echoing like a promise. Then humanity will fall screaming, the crater rumbled. The air grew colder. The hum of the wormhole grew louder, steadier, and as the commander's eyes finally closed, the stars above seemed to tremble. The war for Earth had only just begun.